So good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to this packed session. Thank you to those who are sitting in the splash zone here. You're in the ideal place to heckle, okay? Because I might actually hear you. You know, I'm old. I can't hear much past the first two rows or whatever. My name is Tony Redmond. I'll be talking to you this morning about running a tight ship, controlling Teams, controlling Microsoft Teams. And just as an introduction, I've been around Office for a long time, mostly with Exchange. And in fact, that's not so bad because over 22 years of Exchange, we learned some good habits and we learned some really bad habits. And you know, the definition of insanity is when you keep on doing bad things again and again and again and again and again, hoping to have a better outcome. So some of what you're going to hear today comes from the experience that we had with Exchange and with other products along the way. Anyway, I've been an MVP for quite a long time, and I write for Petri.com. I hope some of you have read some of my idle ramblings there. And I also have this project, which is kind of interesting. It's an Office 365 for IT Pros book. It's an ebook, and because of the volume of change that happens in the cloud, we update this book every month, just to keep it going. Anyway, so that's what I do, that's my background, et cetera, et cetera. The goals for this session, we really want to talk about the effective management of the enterprise version of Teams. So I don't know anything about the education version of Teams. I deal with the enterprise version, right? And I'm not going to talk about the free version, the version that you can get for up to 300 users. I'm not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about enterprise. Because, you know, at the end of the day, enterprise are where all the mistakes are made. And when you make a mistake inside a large enterprise, that flaw becomes huge as it is magnified because you have more users exploiting the flaw. So we'll talk about these topics: planning, deployment, management, guest users, compliance, retention, auditing, all the stuff that is really block and tackle kind of management. Okay? I'm not going to talk, excuse me. I'm not going to talk about the transition from Skype. And I have water. I'm not going to talk about that migration or that transition because that could take a completely separate session. Okay, anybody see anything that they would like to talk about apart from that list? Okay, you're all very quiet. It's very suspicious. Okay, let's talk Teams in a nutshell, just to level set everybody. So collaboration for up to 2,500 members, all of whom are contained in a single Office 365 group, which are built around personal chats. That's chats between one-to-one or one-to-many that you control. Okay, our channel-based conversations. Now, it has been called Outlook for today. And the reason why is that, you know, when Outlook was first envisaged around 1996 and then was shipped as Outlook 97, it represented the best guess that developers had of how to build a product, a single product that had all the tools in it for what people did at that time inside an office. So it had email, it had calendar, it had journal, et cetera, tasks. If you look at Teams, it's kind of like you'd say, well, okay, how do people work inside an office today? Well, they do a lot of conversations, that's for sure. They do a lot of messaging. But now they do a lot of video. They do a lot of voice calls. And you want to have all of that integrated. And they use a lot of third-party applications to get work done, and you want to have that integrated. And they generate a lot of documents. They collaborate on a lot of documents, and you want to have that integrated. And that is really why you could look at Teams as being the Swiss Army knife of today for the office. So it's built from many, many, many Microsoft 365 components, including a lot of Azure microservices. If you go to one of the Teams architecture sessions and you look at the list of services those guys put up, you say, wow. This, to me, is really an example of how Office 365 has matured over the last number of years. You know, when Office 365 was first launched in 2011, it was really a collection of 3 mildly cloudified on-premises applications: Exchange, SharePoint, and Lync. And over the last 7 years, what we've seen is that everything is melding together. And now, all of a sudden, you truly have this software toolbox where people can pick and choose different things that have been built either in Azure or in Office 365 to come together to build an application like Teams. Which is the reason why, you know, Teams uses Exchange for its compliance, for its calendar. It uses SharePoint for its file storage. It uses OneDrive for personal file storage and all that Azure stuff, including Azure Active Directory. So Teams, to me, is probably a very good example, is a very good example. I was going to say probably a very good example. It is a very good example of how Office 365 has matured over the last number of years to the point where we now get the opportunity to build new applications built on all of these things. And nobody's recreating the wheel, which is really good. And the last bullet there, it supports multi-factor authentication, which is important. I keep on seeing statistics about Office 365 users not protecting their accounts with MFA. Especially administrator accounts. I cannot understand this. Folks, go home, enable MFA, and use it for your accounts. You'll protect yourself against things like business email compromise and those type of attacks. Teams also supports conditional access, so that's pretty good as well. It means that you can have policies to control things like guest user access and stuff like that. Okay, in terms of governance, this is the kind of life cycle that you could put up and say, okay, what are we going to talk about over the next 30 minutes or so? Clearly, we're going to talk about planning teams, then we talk about how we deploy them, how we're going to use them, the ongoing management that we're going to do on a day-to-day basis. I hope you're going to do ongoing management on a day-to-day basis. We're all IT professionals here, and we all do this type of thing on a day-to-day basis, don't we? Yes. Not going to lie to you. You had me worried. Okay, then everybody's favorite subject, compliance. An opportunity to have a discussion with a lawyer. What's not to like about that? And then end of life, because eventually, you know, some of these teams, like any component, is going to reach the end of its useful existence. And you're going to have to figure out what to do with it. Okay, so we need an end of life policy. So, starting off, planning. What do you want to do? Clearly, there's a lot of hoo-ha in the market about Teams and its major competitor, which everybody thinks is Slack. So there's a fair amount of stuff out there where people are saying, we're going to move from Slack. Okay, it's a good reason to deploy Teams. Next one, do we want to move away from email? Let me share a truth here. Teams is not going to replace email. Intelligent use of Teams will reduce the amount of bad email that is sent in the organization. Bad email is stuff like reply all, okay? When people inside large organizations want to share with everybody the fact that they all work with the same organization because they all have the same logo in their auto-signature. This is bad email. And you can get rid of that kind of stuff. But email is going to be around for a long, long time because Teams will not help you with things like external communication. It won't help you with things like encrypted email. It won't help you with things like formal communication. It'll do a lot for the informal discussions. It'll help you resolve issues. It'll help you drive to consensus. It'll do all of that kind of stuff, but it's not going to get rid of email. So once we have decided what we want to achieve, we then have to say, okay, there are other technologies in the Office 365 suite which we're all paying for. How are we going to interact with them? SharePoint is a big one, and we'll talk about that. You might be using Yammer, in which case you're considering, oh, well, why would I ever bring Teams into the organization? As it turns out, there's going to be a Yammer web part that you can now introduce to Teams that makes the two work better together, so that's good. and then email, which we just talked about. But right down there at the bottom, really, really important thing, how do we measure success? Do we go to users and ask them, are you happy? Do we look at it financially? Do we just measure it in terms of usage? I don't know. Every organization is different. But it's up to you to have some way of saying, yeah, my team's deployment is successful. And who's responsible for it? In terms of planning, going back to basics, Teams depends on Office 365 groups and Azure Active Directory. Every team has an Office 365 group. Okay? And that Office 365 group is kind of critical because that's how Teams membership is managed. Behind the scenes in Azure Active Directory, you have the groups and you have the membership, but Office 365 groups we definitely want to keep well managed because it's going to be the path to other resources like Planner and SharePoint, et cetera, et cetera. Next point, everybody in a group shares common access. So this causes a certain amount of angst in situations where you bring in guest users, and we'll talk about in a little while, or where you have a team where you say, I want to share this kind of information with those people, but not with those people. Well, you have to wrap your head around the fact that because Teams uses Office 365 groups as its membership service, it inherits the ownership and membership model, which says that everybody in the team has equal access to resources. So once you post something in a team, be it a file, be it a conversation, or whatever, anybody can see it. That's just the way things work. Office 365 groups policy. This is a policy inside Azure Active Directory. There's one policy for a tenant, and it's shared by the applications that use Office 365 groups, like Teams. So this policy is where you get control over things like naming, the classifications, and whether or not you have free or restricted creation of teams. We'll talk about that in a little while because that is something you do have to get your head around. Also in Azure Active Directory, we've got the collaboration policy, collaboration B2B policy. So this is how, or rather API, this is how Teams extends invitations to guest users outside of your tenant. There's an invitation API. And then when those guest users accept the invitation, they get added to a team by being made a guest user inside your tenant, and then they get access to the resources. We've also got an expiration policy, which controls whether or not groups and teams expire after a certain number of days. Say 700 days, you're expired. Now, expiration is controllable in terms of the number of days, and indeed administrators get an opportunity to say, no, 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 I want to keep those teams going because they have important information. I will talk about that a little bit more. Big thing right there in the bottom. Nothing good in life comes for free. And you need Azure AD premium licenses if you want to use some of these features, including things like the expiration policy and controlling group creation. Okay? So Azure AD P1 licenses, which if you've bought Microsoft 365 or you've bought the Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite, you already have, so that's good. There is a kicker there as well, that if you have guest users, they also need to be licensed. Now, you can't assign licenses to guest user accounts. So the way Microsoft does it is say they expect you to maintain a ratio, a 5-to-1 ratio, for your guest users. So if you've got 100 guest users in your tenant, okay, and you've got 500 normal users, tenant users, you'll need 100 licenses, right? 5-to-1. 5-to-1 guest to tenant users. Okay? So just keep an eye on that. Now, deployment. It's tremendously easy to create teams. It's actually really easy to create Office 365 groups. I counted up the number of ways as 21 inside Office 365. And that's kind of a lot. But it's tremendously easy to create teams. It's tremendously easy to create channels. You can have up to 200 channels in a team. But please, think, engage the brain. Ask the question, do I need this channel? What is this channel going to be used for? If you desperately need a channel to organize your jam recipes, go for it. I suggest in most cases that you don't. Just have a reason. Teams are going to be private, in which case they're limited to only the members of the group. Or they're public, in which case other people can come along and join the group without asking for permission. Okay? Teams can have classifications. And classifications right now are text-only visual clues to say, you know what, this is a super secret group. Later on, as has been announced here at Ignite, you're going to be able to tie actions to those classifications and do things like secure the group a little bit better. In terms of effective use of SharePoint, what do I mean by that? Well, you know what? There are two types of SharePoint people in the world. There are those that actually understand SharePoint, and there are those the people that use SharePoint through interfaces like Teams and groups. I actually think, and I've written about this in the past, that the success we now see with SharePoint, a lot of it comes from the fact that applications like Teams and groups hide the SharePoint user interface from human beings. So Teams makes it really easy to store information in SharePoint. And it's great because once you get information in SharePoint, it means all of that information, all those files, are available to all of the compliance features and all of the other super big features that SharePoint has behind the scenes. However, if you have an existing SharePoint deployment, you've rolled out all your team sites, you've got document libraries stuffed with information, stuff like that, you're going to have to think a little bit about how you're going to make that information available to teams. That's probably going to be through tabs that take people to particular locations, like a document library. And you're going to have to think about permissions and all the rest of it to make sure that they can get to it. I've got a point here about avoiding channel chaos. Channel chaos is where you present too many channels to users. Most humans really can't make choices all that well. If they see 17 or 25 different channels in a team, they're going to have to think about how they communicate. Where am I going to post this message? What is the most appropriate place to post this message? You've now just created a barrier in the type of collaboration you want to enable. So again, that comes back to think about creating your channels. And also think about the etiquette that you have within the channels. Now, etiquette is very simple stuff. I'll give you two. Firstly, always start a new topic with the subject. It's a simple thing, but it helps people track what's going on inside the channel. It's a really simple thing. But I can tell you, even the most super skilled MVPs, and we all share a team, when they're discussing stuff, the number of new topics that are started off without a subject is phenomenal. So this points to user training. You need to help people to use the tool. Second little thing, always reply to an existing topic if one is available. Simple. I mean, those two simple things make channels much more usable to people. They'll see all the subjects of the topics that people are discussing, and all of the replies will be under the topic. But I can tell you here and now that people won't do it, that you will need to nag them to do this. We do this all the time. You will need to do them. The last thing about deployment, keep an eye on your usage reports. The usage reports that are in the Office 365 Admin Center will help you track what's happening inside Teams. Now, we'll come back to that in a little while, but it's a good way to just have a broad stroke understanding of what's happening inside the tenant, what kind of usage is happening. In terms of ongoing management, we now have the Teams and Skype for Business admin console. Today I published on Petri an article about the new facility that they've added, which is to manage Teams inside that console. And you say, wow, wasn't that basic? Well, it wasn't there up to now. It is now there. It's in preview. It'll be available early next month. It makes managing Teams much more easy. So you're going to have to just keep an eye on that. Then you're going to think about, how am I going to extend Teams with bots and apps and connectors and stuff like that? There's a huge variety of these things. But again, do you have a business reason for adding any of these to a team? If you do, great. If you need to add Trello, go ahead. There's a nice connector there. There's nice integration. Go and do it. If you need to add a couple of bots like HipMonk, yep, go ahead. But do you need the HipMonk bot in every single team, in every single channel? Probably not. So just think about what you're doing. You can send email to Teams. You can't send email out of Teams, but you can certainly send email to Teams. And what happens is that every channel has an email address. And you can use that email address to email content into the Teams, including attachments. The attachments will be taken and stored in SharePoint, as will the message. The reason why this facility exists is that, we live in a world where people have lots of ways of communication. So they'll probably start off a conversation in Outlook, an email, and they'll want to go and continue the conversation in Teams. And this is a way of getting some information into Teams so you can continue that conversation. In terms of management, you have to figure out, do you want people to do this? If so, how do you make those email addresses available to people? You're going to have to tell people. You're also going to have to figure out, do you want third parties to email into those channels? Because out of the box, anybody who's got a valid email address can send to the email address for the channel. So you may want to block that so it's only particular domains. How does it work? If you create an email to a channel email address, it goes to a special phantom kind of mailbox that's hiding in the cloud, and it's picked up from there and imported into Teams via a connector. And it just pops up in the channel just like any other conversation. All works pretty well. Okay? Speaking about email, if you are going to think about, if one of your goals that we talked about earlier on is to transition from email, then this is where the usage reports really come into play. Because ideally what you'd want to see is that some element of your email traffic in the tenant is going down while Teams traffic is going up. If email traffic is not going down, then maybe you're not doing a good enough job on adoption. I do have that point here about the audit log. We'll come back to that. The audit log is really, really an interesting place inside Office 365. And you do want to have a look at it daily. I know it's a boring activity, but it's just a quick check just to make sure what's happening. Okay, end of life, what happens? Well, we've got this expiration policy. This is one of those added cost extras that needs Azure AD Premium. Basically what happens is that you set a policy which can cover all teams in your tenant, all Office 365 groups in the tenant, or only specific teams or groups. And you set an expiration period, say 700 days, 1,000 days, 1,200 days, whatever it is. 30 days before the expiration period elapses, the owners, and only the owners of the teams start to receive email. They don't get it inside Teams, they receive email to say, hey, your group or team is about to expire. Do you want to extend its lifetime? If they say yes, happiness and light, and the expiration period is extended by whatever it is, 700 days or 1,000 days or whatever. If they fail to answer that notification, they ignore it, or they just decide, heck, that team is expired. Once the expiration period elapses, a background process kicks in, and it soft deletes the team. When a team is soft deleted, it means it disappears from user view. The resources are still there. They're maintained in a soft deleted state for 30 days. And once the 30-day period elapses, permanent removal takes place. Permanent removal means that those resources are now not recoverable. Okay? So, from a management perspective, you have to keep an eye on important teams. You might have an all-company team, or you might have a team for executive communications. It's a good idea to add an administrator who might be reading the email as an owner to that team so they get those notifications. Or you can write some PowerShell to go behind the scenes and check to see what teams are coming up for expiration, and then maybe, prompt the owners to say, you may want to extend the lifetime. In terms of archiving teams, there are two approaches you can take. And archiving teams is really a way of saying, I'm not sure that this team should be deleted. I may want to keep it around because it either contains some interesting information or somebody wants to use it in the future. And there are two ways of doing it. In the product, you can set a team to be read-only. And that's what it means when you archive it inside the product. Or behind the scenes, if you want to write some PowerShell, all you do is you just remove all of the users from the membership list. And that means that nobody can access the team except the owners. And then, later on, if you want to bring it back online, you just add new members. Okay? So that's how you take care of end of life. Now, guest users, big feature. Guest users can be enabled for all teams, or it can be enabled for some teams, or you can enable it for all teams, but really block just some teams. You do it either way. It's all done through PowerShell, unfortunately, but that's the way life is. So before you can use teams, you may guest users, you need these things to be done. You need to make sure that Azure AD allows guests to be invited. If guests can't be invited, we can't issue invitations. Office 365 groups have got to allow external guests as group members, and SharePoint must also allow guests to access team resources. Okay? Once you add a guest to a team, you get a guest user account inside Azure AD. It's fine. And those same accounts can be used to access Teams, Planner, Groups, or any other application that supports guest user access. I do suggest that you take the opportunity to add photos for guest users. This is a manual process. You're going to have to go to the Azure AD portal and upload a photo for guest users. You may not want to do it for all guest users. Maybe you want to do it for really important people. But it just means that when people are looking at conversations in Teams, they see those faces instead of those, the default circle that Office 365 uses with people's initials in it. So easy enough to do. Go to the Azure AD portal and upload a picture. Now, the last bullet there is using IRM. IRM is rights management. If you have a team that has guests in it, remember the team's management model means that everybody in the team has the same access to everything, including guests. So if you have important documents in the SharePoint document library, the guests have access to all of that information. They have read-write access. So there are situations where you may want to say, okay, I want to have guests, but I only want to have guests for messaging or for chats. I don't want them to see the documents. What do? Use rights management to protect the documents that are stored inside SharePoint. Because rights management means that a document is wrapped in an encrypted wrapper, And part of that wrapper defines the rights that people have to access it. If you don't give the guest users rights to access the documents, they will be able to see the metadata, so they'll be able to see the list of documents, but anytime they try to open those documents, they won't be able to get at them. Now, the alternative, if you don't want to do that, it's because it's kind of kludgy to give people a list of documents and say, hey, guess what, you can't see any of this content, right? Alternatively, what people do is they set up two teams. So they have a team for internal discussion and a team where guests are invited to. And you keep all the internal stuff in the internal team. Do what you like. In terms of PowerShell, Microsoft is not going to be able to do everything with Teams. Forget about it. They've done an enormous amount already. There's lots and lots of stuff out there. But they're not going to do everything to help you administer or run Teams. So that's why you have PowerShell. And PowerShell takes care of automation, reporting, and management. Right now, the Teams PowerShell module is limited. Right now, because it was written to deal with setting the options that are available inside the Teams client. However, there are lots of other PowerShell modules out there, including the Exchange Online module, which has all the commandlets to deal with Office 365 groups. And because it deals with Office 365 groups, it deals with Teams as well. So you can use those commandlets to go and stitch together PowerShell to get stuff done, which is really, really, really good. You're never going to get to user content with PowerShell. User content means the messages in a team or the files in a SharePoint site, right? If you want to get to user content, you're going to have to write stuff with the graph. Okay, so there's that delimitation. PowerShell for management automation, the graph if you want to go to user content. And there's lots of examples of PowerShell commandlets out there, or scripts out there, that you can go and borrow, steal, repurpose, claim as your own, improve, debug, whatever. There's lots of examples out there, so don't be proud. Go and get them and use them for your implementation. In terms of compliance, so every single time somebody sends a message in Teams, if it's a private message inside a private chat or it's in a channel conversation, the message is going to be captured. Now, is there anybody in the room who's done an e-discovery action? Oh, there's a few of you. Oh, me too. It's fun, isn't it? Okay, so you need to understand this stuff, right? Okay. First thing, where are those chat records stored? So for personal chats, they're in the mailboxes of the participants. So if you and I have a conversation, a personal conversation, Teams is going to store a conversation record inside my mailbox and your mailbox. And you might say, why does that happen? It's because a chat is deemed to be not owned by anybody. Once you set up a chat, everybody can join in. So therefore, Teams creates chat records in everybody's mailbox. For hybrid users, or guest users, they don't have Exchange Online mailboxes, right? So what happens is that Exchange has set up these phantom mailboxes in the cloud. They're in a special tenant. You don't have to worry about them. Those mailboxes are there to capture these compliance records. And as we'll see later on, you can search those compliant records if you need to do e-discovery. So you're always going to be able to get back any message sent by a guest user or a hybrid user. For channel conversations, they're captured in the group mailbox. So each team has a group mailbox in Exchange Online, and that's where they go. So where are they stored? They're stored in the team chat folder. That's the English translation. If you run Teams in different languages, they're going to be translated. So basically what you can do is you can run the very old commandlet right now of get mailbox folder statistics, and you'll see them. If you're moving from Skype for business, you may notice there's two big differences here. Two big differences. The first thing is that every message in a conversation is in a separate compliance record. Separate. It's not the transcript format that Skype for Business uses. Okay? Second thing is that users can see Skype for Business transcripts because the conversation history folder in their mailbox is available to them. They can't see, they can never see the Teams compliance records. So two big differences. So what happens then if you want to go and search for these things? Because that's what e-discovery is all about. Well, okay, they're in mailboxes, so because they're in mailboxes, they're automatically indexed, and they're automatically discoverable and searchable. Okay? As we said earlier, there's one record per message. And because there's one message per record, or one record per message, the problem that you're going to face as e-discovery administrators is that if you're asked by a lawyer to retrieve all the records for a conversation, sure, you can do that. Boom, get them all. But you then have to put them in order. You have to give them all to the lawyer and say, here are all the records, and here's the order that they occurred in. Now, this is, again, a difference with Skype for Business Online. Because Skype for Business Online, you had the transcript, and you saw all of the interactions one after the other. Okay? But it's just a different. Records for all channels in a team. So if you have 200 channels in a team, you're going to get all of the compliance records inside that one folder. Expect that when you go looking. Another thing that I would say to you is that from a compliance perspective, and this is getting really nerdy, the compliance records are copies. They are not actual records. They're copies of what happened. They don't have some of the metadata that Teams uses. For example, they have no evidence that somebody liked a message. And that could be an important indication somebody actually saw a message. Okay, so that's just a thing. When you do search and you get all the records out, you'll find that you can use this thing called a reply chain identifier, which is really a Unix timestamp to link them all. So you can go and do a search, and we'll see that right now. So here we go and do a search. And I've done a search for, if you look at the keywords right over in the far left, you can see that I'm looking for a long string. That's that Unix timestamp that identifies a particular conversation I want to get hold of. And it's saying, and kind I am. I am is the way, it's the format for Teams compliance records. And right down over in the far side, because we're all IT pros here and we like a bit of PowerShell encoding, that's the PowerShell to start off a new compliance search to go and find records, including those for guest users and hybrid users. Because it has two very important parameters, include user app content and allow not found exchange locations. So in other words, it's saying, go find me the phantom mailboxes. Now, because we're all clean living people here, not getting a lot of feedback, so some of you are having doubts about that statement, right? Okay. There might be a possibility that somebody posts something that they shouldn't in a team. You know, they tell the CEO that the CEO sucks dirty canal water or something like that. And you want to rescue that person's career. Okay? We've had this problem for years and years and years in Exchange. You know, somebody sends a message, they say, oh, I shouldn't really have sent that message to everybody in the organization. Can you get it back for me, right? Same type of problem exists in Teams, but there's no real good way out of the box. We have to do some work to actually get it back. I will say up front, if people recognize that they have a problem, they've sent something that they shouldn't, they can clean up their own mess. If you let users in Teams settings, if you let them delete their own messages, if you've turned off that feature, which is available for every single team, so it's settable on a per team basis, then they're going to have to go and get an administrator, a team owner, to delete the message. There's no equivalent for search mailbox, which those of you that came from the Exchange world will know has got the ability to search all the mailboxes on a tenant and blow away anything that they found like spam or malware or whatever. So what we're going to have to do is you have to run an Office 365 content search. An Office 365 content search is what we saw just a moment ago, to go and find the compliance records. You go and look for the compliance records for the bad stuff, and then you remove those bad things. And then the synchronization from Exchange to Teams will make sure that they're taken out of the Teams data store. Okay? Content searches have got a thing called purge actions that you can use for that purpose. The one thing to remember is that a purge action for a content search only ever soft deletes an item. It doesn't hard delete. The other thing, as it says there, we can only handle 10 items at a time. So if you have a user who has posted 12 offensive messages and comes to you with a request to rescue their career, you're going to have to tell them it's going to take a little bit of time, but $100 will go a long way to solving the problem. Okay, retention policies. These are now available. They're Office 365 retention policies, but you can't mix and match Teams retention policies with retention policies that apply with Exchange or SharePoint or OneDrive. They are specific for Teams. They only cover the Teams workload. Behind the scenes, what happened is that the Exchange managed folder assistants will go and process all those mailboxes that we just talked about. And it removes the compliance records from those mailboxes. And it is the act of removing the compliance records from the mailboxes that eventually causes a ripple effect to happen. So we remove it from Exchange. Synchronization happens between Exchange and Teams. Teams removes all of the items from its data stores. It then signals the clients to say, hey, guess what? You don't have those messages anymore. Clean up your cache, and they're removed from user view. So it's a process that takes a little bit of time, and it all happens in the background. Okay? My testing says sometimes it can take up to 4 days before items are removed totally from client view. And that's the important one, because you want clients, you want people using the Teams clients not to see these items that have just been removed, but it's happening. Now, there's a 7-day minimum at the moment for retention. Okay, you can't go and do a 2-day retention period, blow away all items after 2 days old. Can't do that at the moment. The Teams guys are working on it. It's slightly complicated because of the use of the Exchange managed folder assistants, because the managed folder assistant processes mailboxes once a week inside Office 365. But they are working on that. Okay, audit records. I said earlier on, you want to go and look at the audit log. The audit log is stuffed full of information, including a whole pile of stuff about Teams. So you'll be able to find out and answer questions about who's creating all those channels. Where are those channels being created? Who's creating Teams? Who's adding guest users to Teams? And if you look outside of the Teams audit records themselves, you can find out who are the guest users who are accessing Teams, who are active guest users, what documents are guest users accessing. There's a wealth of information to be gained from the Office 365 audit log. So go and have a look at it. You can go through the Security and Compliance Center to have a look at it. You'll see up to 90 days of audit records there. That's the amount stored inside Office 365. You can use Office 365 Cloud App Security if you've got an E5 tenant, okay, or you pay for the add-on. That gets you up to 180 days of audit records. Or you can use a third-party product like Quadratec's radar reporting, where you can have much longer, but you'll pay a little bit more for that, for the extra storage. But the point is that if you really use the audit log, you will find stuff there that nobody else suspects is actually available. And you'll be able to construct reports, you'll be able to understand exactly what happened inside Teams, what's happened inside Azure Active Directory, what's happened inside Exchange and SharePoint and OneDrive. It's a huge place to go and look. Okay. Boy, they said these 45-minute sessions would be a lot easier. They're not. So in summary, after our 45 minutes together, Look, it's like any technology. Practical sense brings you a hell of a long way. So know what you want to get out of teams, control what you're doing with teams, have a plan, execute the plan, manage the life cycle, and you'll have a hell of a lot of success. Okay, that's all I have time for today. Thank you.